these two powerful folks joining me on the stage today. And I would love to have you all, dive in. I would love if you could introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your career journeys working in climate finance and philanthropy.
Great, I can start. Great. Hi everyone, my name is ALIKIA. I'm an Associate Director in the ClimateWorks Foundation Sustainable Finance Program. For those of you who aren't aware, ClimateWorks is a philanthropic platform. We're registered as 501c3. We work across grant-making strategies for mitigation and adaptation. We do also have an advisory and insights team that's kind of an in-house think tank for philanthropy. I work across our grant-making strategies that are around private market activation and that directly touch on private finance. And I've been here for 5 years. Just to give you an idea of what the job is, I would say around 50% of it is grant-making strategies, thinking about a theory of change for a particular ecosystem, landscaping who works on it, and thinking about how to grant make across topics like strategic communications, policy design, research and data and analytics as well, and in some cases actual technology deployment strategies for different programs. Prior to joining ClimateWorks, I started my career in Citigroup in the investment banking division, and after that I both pursued a master's in urban planning while working on a major finance research team.
I'm Sandy. I'm currently a candidate at UC Berkeley with a dual master in MBA and Master of Climate Solutions. Before coming to Berkeley, I was working in UBS in Hong Kong in the sales and trading division, looking over derivatives and commodities trading. Coming to Berkeley, I wanted to explore a bit more around climate investing, especially the different stage and sizes of the climate checks. So that's why I'm doing my master's degree here. Currently, I'm also interning with Circulate Capital. They're a growth stage fund focusing on circular economy in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So I'm helping them to really pan out their thesis for their second fund, which is going to still be around circularity, but moving beyond plastic, which was their original focus.
Amazing, amazing. So from each of your standpoints, are climate finance and philanthropy roles growing across the sector? And if they are, what are some of the roles that you see being the most valuable for a team like yours?
Yeah, I can take it first. I think when it comes to climate finance and philanthropy, especially on the finance side, there are different stages of the capital and therefore a variety of kind of finance that we're thinking about here. So, coming out from the very early stage, you have the more like pre-seed to seed VC, and then you have more on the growth stage investing where the technologies that you're looking at are more towards commercialization, eventually moving toward project finance where you kind of have your existing factories or your like first clients and you're moving to expand a bit more beyond that, and then later on to more of like traditional banking where you're seeing more IPO deals like these geothermal companies that we're looking at right now on the market. So kind of coming back, like why you kind of need this introduction is where I'm seeing in the broader climate finance market is that the overall check size is definitely growing and the funding pool is getting bigger and bigger, and like CTVC, which is one of the newsletters and kind of a data intelligence platform that closely track climate finance and climate funding, has also shown kind of similar trends upward as well. But kind of where that capital sits in the broader finance market is that they've observed more and more checks are going into the later stage side. So you're seeing bigger players deploying into project finance as well as later stage deals compared to the more earlier stage innovation. Not so close with philanthropy, but
yeah. So philanthropy is a little bit more, it's not the same for each philanthropy, and we work across topics, right? And so there are different areas of climate finance that you could work. We're an organization that works, for example, on mitigation and adaptation. Our sister organization, the Climate Land Use Alliance, CLUA, works on land use specific topics, and I would say that there's growth or ebbing in each of those those topics. And so, in climate philanthropy, particularly related to adaptation resilience, there are probably more jobs available there, and we're seeing heightened interest, which is a great thing. It wasn't a priority maybe as much 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And we're also seeing a lot of interest in nature finance. On climate finance, there's still interest, but I can't really speak to whether it's growing. I think that actual story is like philanthropy by philanthropy.
Could you define for people what nature finance means?
It's a lot of things. I mean, climate finance and nature finance are, for us, the way we define sustainable finance is aligning the financial system, which is both public flows, i.e. the flows of government expenditures, and private sector flows, i.e. major financial institutions across the capital stack that Sandy described, are getting those flows aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement, which are across mitigation, adaptation, and social justice. What nature finance is the same, but aligned with conservation goals that center people and planet. So I can speak a little bit to the Climate and Land Use Alliance with the caveat that I am not an employee of theirs, and I really urge you to look at their website. They really focus on tropical forest protection and deforestation in alignment with the rights of local communities. But I think obviously nature finance means a lot to people because they're different ecosystems, but it's the same thing, public finance and private financial flows in alignment with broader sustainable development goals.
That's great. So, I've had a lot of people who maybe either work in finance but don't know how to get into the climate aspect of it all. I'm just curious, you both seem to have a deep background in finance, but with now with a touch of climate or getting into that. So I would love if each of you could talk a little bit more on the transferable skill sets that either you had going into your current roles or some skills that maybe you had to build to step into working in climate finance and philanthropy.
Yeah, so I started my first job post, so first I would say in college, in undergrad, my economics thesis was about energy markets in India. And so I really kind of knew from there that that's what I wanted to direct my career to, either something that was more community-led, which is why I ended up going to urban planning school, or something that was about finance and infrastructure finance and mobilizing flows. I think the reason that I did investment banking is because it's just a great kind of baseline for how the financial system works. You get exposure to how, the way a large Fortune 500 thinks, what its strategic imperatives are, what its incentives are. You also get an understanding of how a major bank thinks and what its strategic incentives are. And they're, it's not... It's not the easiest job, famously, but I think you do get a lot of skills really fast. You learn how to project manage for an entire deal team of, deal sizes that are over a couple $1 million at least. You learn how to produce deliverables at great speed, at great quality. So, it's not an ideal job path, but I think the exit opportunities and the kind of life skills that you get from it are certainly transferable. But I do want to say, particularly for philanthropy, for a climate finance philanthropy job, you don't necessarily need to have a finance background. I'm actually quite unique in that I do. A lot of people come from nonprofit or come from other foundations and before that worked in nonprofit. And so the senior director of our program came from the Principles for Responsible Investing, which is an investor network focused on alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. Another colleague of mine came from the Overseas Development Institute, which is a think tank focused on sustainable finance policies. So there's really a wide array of backgrounds that you can come from.
That's great.
Yeah, double click on that. I'm also thinking about there's so many different functions within climate funds as well. So you have your traditional investor role where say if you're in a growth equity stage kind of funds, like a lot of them are coming from investment banking, but there are also more on the impact side of team where you need more of a consulting skill set or in general like scientific skill sets to be able to measure and think about the strategy for your portfolio companies as well as your fund deployment. So there are kind of a differentiation in terms of the roles that you can take within climate finance. I also want to mention that with early stage VCs like venture capitals, they also value if you have a more of a scientific background, because at that stage, like a lot of the roles is about assessing the feasibility of the technology and thinking through like how do you take the technology from the lab to kind of a pilot program. So having a PhD or having some sort of a technical skills can really help there as well.
That's super helpful, and I wanted to toss it back to you because you are in a graduate school program. I wanted to talk a little bit more about why was that a good path for you? Why did you choose to go to grad school? And now with like some of the skill sets you're building, how has that led you now into the internship you're at with Circulate Capital?
Yeah, so my background was more so I was working in Hong Kong and back in Asia, like there are a lot of funds that are actively deploying into, but a lot of time like they're hiring more senior stage while I was more at the junior stage of my career. And that is why I was thinking about coming to grad school to really have that experience, have the knowledge, and also have the time to explore like what stage of climate finance that I want to get into. So essentially I'm kind of like giving myself the time to like sit back and reflect and learn. Having that kind of financial skill sets, foundations from an investment bank definitely helped me with kind of paving the way into a climate finance related fund. And for me personally, it's really thinking about how those skills can be mapped into the specific needs of these funds are looking for. So kind of like taking back, like thinking about what I want to do at grad school, for me it's really to think about like what's capital stack that I want to join. Like as I mentioned, there are different stages of the capital. So I was like in the first month I was just like, maybe I want to do VC, and then I started going to VC events and then realized like, hey, maybe this is not for me, this is too people oriented, a lot of like deep technology that I just don't understand because I have a business degree. And then so like it's kind of like taking that step back and like just explore a little bit, like maybe through case competition, maybe through just going to events or doing internship. And so how I got into this internship was that in Berkeley Haas, we have a class called Climate Solutions Fund, and it's like a fund as a curriculum. So as a student, you're basically grouping up, and the school give you $300K for you to invest in a growth stage company. So like every group would have kind of your sector thesis, you would develop like what you want to look into in this sector specifically. And so for my team, I was looking at data center decarbonization. So like, we have to talk about AI in 2026, and data center is obviously the infrastructure that needs to be decarbonized. So kind of taking it from there and going through almost like you're a fund investor, like how would you do diligence, how would you source companies, and so like that gave me a really good starting point of like what I like and what it is like to actually work in this role. And also through that class, I connected with the fund, sort of like the founder of the fund that I'm working with, because he's also a Haas MBA like 10 years ago. So I came back to our class, talk about his fund, and I was like, oh my God, like I follow you for so long, can I work for you? And that like really just became the starting point of my internship with them. And I thought it's really, really helpful because working at school for a fund and working for a real fund, it's also very different because of the check size you can give, because of the level of due diligence that's just different from kind of these two perspectives. So every fund also have their own kind of thesis development, their sourcing process as well. So like before getting into like, talking to the funds, like it would be really helpful for you to just go onto their website and see like, whether what they're doing is what you really like or like what you kind of resonate with in your personal values.
That's super helpful. I'm taking notes in my head right now. That's so great. So passing it back to you, I love what you were saying that, actually a lot of the people that work with you in philanthropy come from nonprofits. So I just wanted to know if you have some examples of what some of those roles or positions look like on, a team. Like, is it bringing together folks in, project management? Is it folks who know how to do that cross-sector collaboration? I mean, I know it's probably all of the above, but if there's any roles that maybe people might not expect that they would see, working at a philanthropy, and how they could think about those skill sets?
Yeah, so we have like I said, there are kind of two main pillars at ClimateWorks. One is advisory and insights, which is our in-house think tank. One is the programmatic grant-making teams, which is where I sit. For us, we have kind of an analyst role that's really entry level. You don't need a master's degree, and it's really supporting on kind of everything across the team that needs project management support. Then we do have senior associates and program managers who are kind of the main project managers of the team and support everything from actually making sure our grants come out. We fundraise as well. They support our fundraising processes. They set up our planning. They support our budget. And then, where I sit as an associate director, you're really driving strategy and kind of guiding the grant making and kind of driving the funder relationships. And then we have a senior director who kind of oversees all of the above. If you are more analytically minded, I work a lot with our advisory and insights team because we have a vertical on scenario modeling and tools. We have folks who come from a data analytics background. They work with the IPCC scenario teams quite a bit. So if data and modeling is kind of more your shtick, that's a great place to be. We're a little bit different in that finance is a transversal topic, and so we cut across different sectors, and different folks in our programs work with different sectors at ClimateWorks. And so, for example, I might work more with our industrials team because I work on private finance. Their questions are all about how do we scale finance for these technologies, some of which are proven, some of which are not. But my colleague Ipek, a lot of the things or a lot of the types of finance that are relevant to conservation or food and agriculture, for example, have to do with the public budget. And so she might work more with those programs. And just to say, people in our food and ag team, people who work at the Climate and Land Use Alliance, a lot of them come from nonprofit advocacy, campaigning backgrounds, and a lot of folks at ClimateWorks also are ex-US government or ex-state government, particularly, we have the full array, but those are just the kind of roles, I guess, to answer your question.
No, that's super helpful. Just to kind of round us out with resources here, I just wanted to ask, what are some, books or certifications or even degrees that you guys would want to recommend? Obviously, I know we have a program here, but just anything that you think could give people a leg up to get started if they're I would say both a resource plug for someone who has no finance background, and then a resource plug for people with a finance background would be great, because we have a mix of both in the audience.
So for people who don't have a lot of background in finance and just want to get into climate tech, see what the deal scenes are like, highly recommend CTBC's newsletter. It's completely free. They send out every Monday morning, so it could kind of just be your coffee read. And then if there's any startups that you're interested that just recently fundraised, or they would have bankruptcy or exit news as well, then who are potentially hiring, who are not, and gives you a better sense of what are some of the sectors that are more in the mind of investors right now. That also gives you a good sense of what the commercial landscape will look like across different sectors of climate tech. So highly recommend that. I also really like listening to podcasts. So Bloomberg's Zero podcast has a variety of different things, and it's super conversational. So if you're just looking to listen to something on your way to work or school, that's something highly recommend. If you like energy more, Latitude Media is very focused on energy, and given energy is so tied up with data center and AI, it's you're going to see a lot of that in their content as well. For the finance folk, my suggestion is actually to kind of take some time, figure out which stage of financing that you want to get into, because I feel every stage would require a slightly different skill. So like the later stage you go, like you will have to have more of a fundamental financial analysis, modeling, valuation kind of skill sets. And then you kind of go on to like Wall Street Prep or even like some project finance websites to like get some case studies and like kind of like train up your financial muscle, like in a sense. So I don't really have a specific resources in that regard, but would just recommend you to like figure that out. And the last thing is, if you have any funds that you really like, a lot of the funds out there do have their insights page on their website. So personally, like I follow, say like the Builders Vision, which is more of a family foundation that's closely following in the climate tech area. And then also B Capital, that's more like energy, industrial. Like they all have really good insights, like probably take 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And that would give you a sense of like what they're actually looking for people that actually have the money to like deploy in.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like such a privilege to be working in a field where like the things you want to listen to and read are in your free time are the same things that are relevant to your work. So, you know, take advantage of that. I would say I double click on podcasts. In addition to the ones that Sandy named, I listen to Volt's, Jigar Shah, who used to lead the Loan Programs Office in the Department of Energy and is a co-founder of Generate Capital, which is a very famous climate fund, now has a podcast that I enjoy listening to, and they cover some of the political economy of scaling energy as well as the actual infrastructural and technological challenges. And then if you guys want, I guess, more kind of exposure to like the advocacy component of climate, I really enjoy anything Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson puts out. I think she tries to make everything that she puts out very consumable for any audience. And that's just mostly on climate and conversation, particularly ocean conservation. And Amy Westervelt is another journalist that I follow. I would say like weird, but like follow as many people on LinkedIn. A lot of the stuff that I consume, given how much the work that we do is tied to academia, is reading what comes out, and it comes out the fastest on LinkedIn, and you'll get the public version from there as well. And then as far as certificates go, so as Sandy said, as you go towards kind of the infrastructure stage of financing, you do need project finance expertise. And so there are 2 certificates that you can look at. One is, I think, just called Project Finance Modeling something. It's not US specific. It kind of takes a more like global kind of loan agreement lens, and so it won't follow the US tax equity structure. But in the US, I think there's Pivotal 180, and I know a lot of people who have done those courses. It's got them good jobs, so I think it does have good resume value. But I'll just say for philanthropy, like I think there are lots of roads to philanthropy. There's, you don't have to have like a cookie cutter career path to it. So it's a little different.
I love that. Such practical advice from both of you. I really appreciate that. And I just want to say some last plugs on climate finance and philanthropy. I would definitely say that there's a lot of digests on LinkedIn. We'll be emailing out resources related to climate finance and philanthropy, feeds that we follow on LinkedIn, as well as some organizations that we've partnered with in the past from the philanthropy side. So make sure to check out that. And as I mentioned before, you all were sent the agenda to your Luma links. If you haven't, please contact our check-in desk, and you will be able to connect with these lovely folks on LinkedIn. And let's give them an amazing round of applause. Thank you. And hold on tight for an incredible workshop that will lead into lunchtime. Hold on.